You can wear a cross, but how many are willing to carry it?
Yeah, you can wear a cross, but how many are willing to carry it? Good. So, when your eyes are off the Lord, your testimony changes. Because your let me tell you, can I just throw this in there? Added measure, no extra charge. Our testimony is only as valid as our most recent experience with God. I can tell you about the goodness of God for the past 57 years of ministry, 56 years of ministry. But that's not what you want to hear. You want to hear what God's doing in my life now. Amen. Because that's what will affect you. Not the testimony of my years behind me, which are valid, good part of the testimony. But that's not what's striking. What is striking is that what is God speaking and working through Pastor Belec and Pastor Stephen and all of you? What is God doing? My testimony, what's it worth? My message, what's it worth? My testimony, what's it worth? It is only as valid as my most recent experience with Almighty God. Right. Because the most recent experience means that the coals are still hot. Somebody shout, praise the Lord. That means that the coals are still hot. That means that the angel still takes those prongs and takes the hot coals from the altar and still sanctifies my lips.
Praise the Lord. Amen.
It means that when I speak to people, it is not off of the cuff of some remembrance and memory a long time ago of what I used to say. But what thus saith the Lord today? Two experiences happened yesterday. Going back again to the doctor's office. The wonderful lady, the doctor, after she was done, she had to step out from the room where they did the procedure. But the other, because while she was operating on me, I was preaching. I mean, I had a captive audience. Where are you going? My arm's open here. All right, so I've got things to say. But I was feeding. I was nurturing, giving nourishment. I was blessing. That's the lady I gave a Greek. You know what the Greek word that I told her? The Greek sentence? I have a revelation of Jesus Christ in my heart. I said all of that. I put it all in Greek, and she said it was perfect. So I was feeding. And then when the doctor left, and the nurse there, whatever she does, that fixes this, sweet, sweet girl, sweet, praise the button. And then I told her about the Lord's table. I said the 5 miracles. And I was about to get my jacket. She said, wait. Tell me about the 5 miracles. I couldn't leave. I couldn't leave. She wanted more. She wanted more. Well, you see, I couldn't tell her what happened to me 20 years ago, 25 years ago. It's not relative for the moment. It's good for me to reflect on. Thou shalt remember the years that I brought you through the wilderness. It's for them. They had to remember that. It's good for us to look and examine them and not make the same mistakes. But they had to remember where they came from. But walking with the Lord and having the most recent experience of the Lord gave way to feed the souls of these people. When I got to the office yesterday, there was a young couple standing on the sidewalk. And again, a lovely young couple. The boy was 19 years old, and the girl looked to be somewhere about 18, 19 years old. They weren't married. And began to talk to them. 25 minutes later, I hadn't even gone into the office yet. Still on the sidewalk in front of the door. They wanted to hear more. They wanted to hear more. They were not in a hurry. Their laundry, she said that she had almost every washing machine going. Okay, I mean, she brought maybe 6 months worth of laundry. But anyways, she said, I'm using every machine in here. Good thing we're alone. And so, but they didn't want to go anywhere. They want to hear more. How does that happen? It happens because there's fresh bread out of the oven.
Amen.
There's new wine to go with that fresh bread. And the people can smell that fresh bread out of the oven. And you know how that smells. Now, keep this in mind. Our testimony is important. You as an individual, you in a marriage relationship, and you within your own family context, and this church as in community context, and social context. Our testimony is only as valid as our most recent experience with God. And I want that to really sink into our hearts here tonight. Now, I'm going to share with you what I had planned on sharing. All this was unplanned. I got a little special treat for you. If you would take one and pass the other all the way down around. And this says men of distinction. For those of you who were there about a month ago, this was October 19th. It's right out a month ago. Is that right? Maybe it's 5 weeks ago. We shared this, Pastor Stephan. And I want to share this with you. And for those of you gentlemen that were there that Saturday morning, you can only be blessed by hearing this again. Because I'm going to read to you here about a young man who was all of 8 years old. All of 8 years old. Huh. Are you ready for this? Everybody got one? You got it? They don't have one back there.
Not yet. He's got.
We're getting it.
Oh, okay. I was wondering. I didn't know where it was. All right.
It's good. We're getting it.
And please don't discard this. Put it in your Bible. Look at it every now and then. All right. Don't do that. Even with the bulletin. That's good stuff on the bulletin. Every week we give you the insights from walking with God and the making of Bible leaders. That's and also what we have in the Voice of Calvary. All of these things are wonderful. Now, Josiah, the fire of the Lord or Jehovah supports, the king of Judah who succeeded his father Amon, when only 8 years old, and one of Judah's good kings, the man who sought after God. The history of Israel's later kings make dreary reading, says J.G. Greenhow. 4/5 of them were equally deficient in brains, talking about the kings of Israel, brains and morals, a combination of wickedness and folly, with nothing of the king about them but the name. But here and there, you come upon a man amidst all these royal puppets. It is like finding a garden in a Sahara, or a jewel in a heap of sham trinkets and dirty stage finery. And I underline the rest of this little stuff. Josiah breaks a long, monotonous series of absolutely worthless monarchs. I underline that. We today as believers need to be breakers of what was fruitless in our families.
Hallelujah.
Somebody shout amen tonight.
Amen.
We need to break the pattern. We need to destroy it and say, no more. The buck ends here. We have to turn ourselves around. I don't want to be a run-of-the-mill, a standard of the world. Before and behind him are moral waste and darkness. He stands out as a figure worth looking at and loving. Josiah's good reign was like a burst of brilliant sunset before the final darkness comes on. And I say, before the rapture comes, let there be, once again, a burst of brilliance and sunset before the final darkness comes. In a life worth studying, let us list a few incidents illustrating the noble character of Josiah. He was left parentless at 8 years of age. No mom and dad left. Josiah had a sorrowful childhood, and as a king at 8 years of age, he was introduced to scenes of violence, outrage, civil war. But God was more than a father to this fatherless boy. Look up here for a moment. What I shared with the gentleman back a month ago, you can't help the family you were born in.
Amen.
You can't help the town you were born in. You
Preach it.
can't help the state or the country that you were born in. You can't help that. I mean, Jocelyn and Jameson were born Belec. They can't help that. I was born Belec in Montreal. You were born who you were born. You can't help that. This Josiah was born into that family. Watch now, not only born into that family, he was born into the chaos and disaster and the mayhem that his father and grandfather and the rest of them before him. He was, watch now, he was born into a monarchy. Did he ask to become king? He was born in a monarchy. He didn't ask to be born of a bunch of losers, and he wasn't asked to be born in a monarchy. You might say, well, how great is that? My father's the king. Right, how great is that? Everybody can brag. Guess who my dad is? He's the king of Israel. Well, when your dad is a bum king, no bragging points here. But he couldn't help that. But the difference, watch now, the difference between Josiah and so many of people today is that rather than stopping the curse from the past,
Amen.
and starting a new generation from them, they complain, they whine, and they wallow in the same muck and mire that they came from because they have no vision for how they can become. What does this all mean? No matter how good or how bad the family situation you were born into, you are called to make it better. Somebody shout amen to that. You were called to make it better.
Amen.
He was a fatherless, he was an orphan. For all practical purposes, at 8 years old. Can you imagine being in charge of a nation at 8 years old? So what happens to an 8-year-old? He's got to find people that are heroes.
Amen.
He's got to find some men and women of valor, of character, of value, of moral integrity, and moral purity. He could not in his young mind wrap his mind around everything that was going on. But it says here that he was a king that sought God. So no matter where we come from, somebody shout praise the Lord, no matter where and what we come from, the key is seek God. He has a plan for your life. Period. He had a good and darling mother. Thank God for what? Say amen to that. Amen. Thank God for darling mother. We know nothing about the mother who undertook Josiah's training apart from her name, Jedidiah, meaning God's darling, which she was not called for naught. She sought to make her son what she was called, God's darling, and her labor and had sweet reward. Did you get that? Her name meant God's darling, and she set out to make him God's darling in that state that he was in. Isn't that powerful? So what does that mean? It means that God always has somebody near you. Oh, somebody help me tonight. When you're in a situation of impossibility, God always has an angel.
Amen.
God always has a way out that you may be able to bear it. God always places a Miriam there. He always places somehow. The mother of Moses came up with the idea of putting him in the bulrushes, in the little basket out there in the Nile River. She came up with an idea. There's somebody around you when you're out of and you're deprived of all ideas. Somebody will have an idea, and probably it'll be birth of God if you can just identify it. Now, would that the fervent zeal and righteous enthusiasm of this earnest, passionate young man might characterize more of young men today. Watch now. He rebuilt the temple when he was 26 years old. How about that? He rebuilt the temple at 26 years old. This consecrated young man saw that it was of no use destroying idols unless he had something better. Oh my God, will that preach?
Oh, yes, sir.
Will that preach? There's no sense of destroying idols unless you have something better to offer. So he had to have the genuine. He had to make sure he had the genuine. He had to make sure he had the real before he destroyed the idols. Because if you destroy, that's just like trying to clean a fish without catching him yet. That's pretty hard to do. And we see that in church all the time in many places. They try to clean people's lives without even having caught them yet. So he had a plan. It was God's plan. Thus, when his destroying fever had spent its force, Josiah began to rebuild and repair the house of God. Watch now. In turning over the rubbish of the temple, watch now, the king made a strange discovery. He came across a buried and forgotten copy of the law, the reading of which strangely affected him. Profoundly humbled, he laid the axe to his own corruptions and went forward to grow in wisdom and godliness. When you commit your life to serving God, even if you don't have all the answers right now, there will be a rock and a rubble somewhere that you'll turn over in your life experience, and there you will find the will and purpose of God in that moment that has been hidden till that time. There are things, people ask me when I'm going to retire, you know. I said, man, I spoke to my sister Lise last night on the phone. Lise, she's the first girl of three after me. There's three boys and three girls. She's the oldest of the girls after me. And I told her, I said, I don't plan on retiring. I'm on the Moses plan. She said, what, 120? I said, yes, the Moses plan. I call it the Moses plan. 120. I got plans for the next 25 years of my life. Don't tell Diane that, but anyway, that's it. And so we find that this young man had something burning in him in that experience of discovering a copy of the book of the law that had been in the rubbles of the temple. And I tell you, Pastor Stephen, that amidst these churches that are moral rubble, there's a diamond somewhere in that trenches of the leftover ruins of those churches today. There's a woman and a man of God somewhere that God's going to bring out. There's going to be a person that's going to be a tremendous power and glory for God. I believe that with all my heart. I'm seeing where a young man was here with us in Sunday school this past Sunday morning, a Sunday school hour. And he's not familiar too much with church. But you should have seen, he sat right there. And you should have seen how he jumped into the mix of conversation in the adult class. I saw a wealth in there that maybe he himself had not seen. How many understand, how many believe tonight that there are discoveries that you have not made yet in your life?
Amen.
There are discoveries you have not made yet in your life. Your best is yet to come. Your best is yet to come. Now, he reigned for 31 years and was only 39 when he died. That Josiah was beloved by his people is indicated by their deep and long continued mourning after his death. He sought after God at the age of 16. Isn't that great? He sought after God at the age of 16. After 16 years in the nursing hands of his mother, good mother Josiah turned from the ways of his father Ammon and his grandfather Manasseh, and took his nobler and remote ancestor David as his model. There's the hero. You see that? That's what we're talking about. Josiah became who he was because he looked for his ancestry, David, as a hero of the faith. See how important it is to have someone that will influence you and impress you to where you want to do exactly the way that person has done. In life's fair morning, Josiah set his heart to seek the Lord. He purged Judah and Jerusalem when he was 20. Youth did not deter Josiah from necessary reformation, and out went all forms of idolatry. Can you say amen tonight?
Amen.
And then I have one more. I got enough time for this. This one is a little older. The father of John the Baptist, the man who was stricken dumb, the priest of the 8th course of Abia, was visited by the angel Gabriel as he was ministering in his turn in the temple. The revelation came to him about the birth of a son in his old age and of his name and mission. His disbelief and the divine message was punished by dumbness and affliction, which vanished when John was circumcised and named. In obedience to Gabriel's command, the babe was named John, and upon his presentation to God, Zacharias, by the Spirit, composed his magnificent benediction. After this, he was banished from Holy Writ. Very simple thing about it. Once again, you see, watch now. Jameson, you want to hear this. And Jocelyn. Zachariah was born now in the priesthood. Born in the priesthood. When I was a young man, I resented my father being a Christian. I didn't want to be one. My dad was a preacher, not at full time, but he's an associate pastor, he's a pastor, he was a treasurer, he did a deacon, he did it all, elder, he did street evangelism. I remember in Villamora on Long Boulevard and Springland, my dad on Sunday afternoon, bring his accordion out there, and he'd have a couple of other people with him, DeVito. And they were standing there, my dad was playing the accordion, and he was singing. I was walking down the sidewalk, and I heard, and I said, look, that's my I walked across the street. I said, man, I don't want to identify with that. My God, I'm embarrassed by my dad out there in the middle of the street in front of God and everybody doing this stuff. I resented what I felt was an infringement on my independence. That because I was born into a Christian family and into ministry, that anger built up to where I was ashamed of my dad's ministry and of the church. By the time I was 15 years old, it had been at least 4 years that I maybe sporadically had attended church. I didn't want to hear about it. I just had no use for it whatsoever. My mom and dad at 10 years old, for me, had a hard time. Had a hard time with me at 10 years old. And if I was ever brought to church, I was dragged. Okay, dragged. Today they call it drug, I think. We had drug problems back then, but it didn't. And so, I had no taste for it, no desire for it. I resented it. Until one time when my mom and dad said, can you babysit for us? And I thought, the worst thing you can do for a 15, 16-year-old is to ask him to babysit his 3 younger sisters. You can ask him to do anything, but to babysit the younger sister, that's about as far-fetched as you for a young man, okay? I got things to do. Gang to hang out with, go out and fight in the street, whatever it was.
Come on now.
I got things, yeah, I got things to do. And then my dad and mama went to church Sunday night, and Monday night, can they babysit again? Where are you going tonight? Church. Where are you going to Monday night? Monday night? What now? In church. Then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 2 weeks to that, 3 weeks to Hey, what are you doing in church? I'm done with this babysitting. All right, I will get some other babysitter if you'll come with us. Wow! I thought to myself, if my 2 choices are babysit or go over here, I guess I can tough this out. I just wanted to have a break from babysitting those 3 things. So anyways, this was in the middle of the winter in February. And of course, the typical funds. Leather jacket, t-shirt, in the middle of the winter, jeans, motorcycle boots, out there on visitation. No, I had to be cool. And of course, a half a tube of Brill cream had to be on there, and had to be the slick going back. And I let my parents, now they were telling me that the church is full. Up until that time, my parents, you know, I never knew our church to have more than a dirty dozen. Okay, there was just, and then my dad was playing the piano, was beat up. And there was nothing carnal or spiritual going on in church, you know what I mean, that would make me want to go there. And so when my mom and dad said the church is packed out, people are standing on the outside, I said, whoa, whoa. Yeah. You know, you're carrying another load there. Whoa. And you know what? As we were approaching on Visitation Street, I saw some people standing outside. I said, hey, what are they doing out here? Why don't you go? It's just cold out here. They said, because there's no room inside. I said, get out of here. So I got to the front door. After I let them walk ahead of me, I didn't want to be associated with my parents going to church. So I was walking behind them. When they got to the front of the door, and I finally caught up, I said, what are you people doing out here? It's packed. There's no room in there for us. Get out of here. This is Pastor Gummer. What? And so I inquired. I went into the front porch and then into the other doors. The place was jammed, almost hanging off the walls. Packed out, every seat, didn't have a seat. We had those long wooden pews, long wooden pews. And what in the world is happening here? And so the Fonz made his way all the way to the front. And there I was, the Fonz looked literally, and the whole 3 rows were nothing but young people, youth, nothing but young people. And so I looked across the audience, and I looked at these kids, I said, no, I'm not sitting in the back of this room. So I went, you and you. And immediately they went from there to the floor, and I sat down. The service began, and my Uncle John was leading the worship service. Everybody stood. And before I knew it, I was standing and I was... Yeah, I'm clapping my hands and, well, man, yeah, I can handle this, yes, good. And then when the whole service was over, I didn't sit down, when the whole worship service was over, he told everybody to sit. My Uncle John said, everybody sit now. And I didn't. I did this. I literally walked up to the front, in front of the pulpit, and I went like this, in front of everybody. Wow. I can handle this. And my Uncle John said, what are you doing? I said, just checking this out. And I interrupted the whole service. I was so caught up. From the first night that I attended, finally I did sit up. The first night I attended, this was a revival that lasted 78 nights consecutively. And I came into it about the 3rd week. And I did not miss one service, night after night, for the rest of that. During that time, I got not only saved, filled with the Spirit, water baptized, but I got a calm on my life. You never know. Because see, when you're born into the priesthood, when you're born into the family of God, whether it's the priesthood or born into a Christian family as such,
Amen.
okay? God has a time that you're going to meet Him.
Amen.
God has a time in your life that God's going to meet with you. And it's going to be so beautiful and so extraordinary. So Zachariah, he was in the priesthood of Aaron, and so was his wife. And he was doing the priest work when they came and told him about John, about the baby. And you know the rest of the story. Until finally he said, thank you that you've allowed me, your servant, to see the salvation of Israel. And he dedicated Jesus to the Lord. Thank you for letting me see the salvation. So now, here's what it is. Young people in the Lord, whether you're born in a Christian family, into the ministry, whatever you're born into, you must live with expectation. Because, see, he prayed that he would see the salvation of Israel. That was his total prayer as a priest before God. Please, and those of you who are young today, James and Justin, the rest of you are young here today, and Stephen and others, are you young? Are you? You're not young. For those of you who are young, what you're not looking for right now is the salvation of Israel. You need to be looking for the rapture.
Amen. Yes, amen.
Which is an equivalence. It's an equivalence to what Zechariah saw, the salvation of Israel. Be looking for the rapture. And so I picked these two as first ones from the scriptures to show us that you can be in the ministry old if you have hope that you're going to see the salvation of God.
Amen.
Amen.
That will change people around you. Or if you're young and you've had a problem at a young age, God has a plan for our lives. And so how he was able to become the great king that he became is because he looked to David, his ancestor, for his model, for he to be his hero. There's a hero somewhere in your life. There's a hero in the midst, perhaps many of them. So we need to learn to draw from that, because God has placed you with these people and placed these people with you so that you can be nurtured, tutored, mentored into the fullness of God. My time has gone, and my heart is still full, but I have to quit. Hallelujah. Did anybody learn anything tonight? Did you? I think this, thank you. God bless you. All right, let's see a little bit clap offering tonight. Praise God. And so I ask you tonight, this is bow our hearts in the word of prayer and say, Lord, I thank you because this is an opportunity, truly an opportunity, for us to understand the value, immeasurable value of people around us that are in